Hello, everyone. You are welcome to the AWCAA COVID-19 webinar series. We've been doing this since the emergence of the COVID-19 pandemic, and we are still here. 2.5 years later, we are still doing it. It's just to be able to provide education to our community to ensure that everyone keeps safe, everyone is fine, and everyone is protected. So thank you everyone for joining this webinar. We have very amazing guests, and they would do justice to the topic that we have today. But before we start, we would like to have the founder and president of the African Women's Cancer Awareness Association, Ms. Ife Nwabuku, to do the introductions.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thank you for joining us this evening. We're glad to have you. Like Mr. Chris, the moderator, has said, we have been here since the emergence of COVID. We're still here. We don't want any of us or any of you to let down your guard. So we have our experts here with us to continue to remind us and help us to stay on course. We want all of you to be healthy. We're thankful that we are still here, and by God's grace, we'll continue to be here. So thank you for joining us. I'll hand you back to the moderator, and he can introduce our guests and our experts, and of course, special thanks to both speakers tonight who never have a problem to come back and help educate our community. So, Mr. Chris, I'll hand you back.
Thank you, Ms. Ife. So we would go straight to the topics and the sessions for today. We have two amazing speakers. We have Dr. Jethro Ekuta. Dr. Jethro Ekuta is Vice President, Global Regulatory Affairs, Alexion Pharmaceuticals Incorporated. And Dr. Jethro has been our resource person for a long time now. And we appreciate the fact that anytime we'll call you, you're always there to answer. So thank you very much. And then we also have Dr. Mireille Bright. She's a registered dietitian and public health nutritionist at Georgetown University. Thank you, Dr. Bright, for also being here today. And we look forward to the perspective that you're going to bring, to today's topic, as we also look forward to celebrating the Thanksgiving. So we would start with Dr. Jethro's session, and then after that, Dr. Bright will come up and then have a session for question and answers. So Dr. Jethro, over to you.
All right, well, thank you so much, Chris and Sister Ife and Dr. Adrian. Thank you all for inviting me back. And, and it's also nice to meet Dr. Bright today. So I'll kick things off. I have a few slides that I would like to show. Actually, quite a number of slides, but I'll go over them very quickly. They are very straightforward things so that Dr. Bright has enough time to share her deck, and also people have time to ask questions. So why do we still need to talk about COVID? The simple answer is it really hasn't gone away. It's still with us, but we have learned to live with it better than we did at the beginning, right? So now it doesn't carry the level of fear that it once did, but that doesn't mean that it's now safe for us to do whatever we want, right? We still have to take some precautions. So let me see if I can, oh, Chris, it says host disabled participants screen sharing. So I don't know if I can share my deck directly. Yeah. Unfortunately, that's what it's saying. So, and I can't hear you.
Yeah, he's muted.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so try it now. You'll be able to do that now.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's see.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yes, I can now. Thank you.
Great.
All right. So, so I wanted to start out, by just an acknowledgement that, first of all of the information I'm going to share with you today is available in the public domain. You can find them on the CDC website. The problem is a lot of people will not have the time to go check it out themselves. So what I'm helping to do today is just to show you where the information is. You can always go there. That's why, I have the link. We can put it on the, chat as well, if it will be helpful to people. Maybe at the end of my presentation, if people want to go back, take a look at it. But of course, I've made some tweaks to it, but by and large, the information is from the CDC website. So the things I wanted to cover today are, fairly quickly talk about some very simple strategies that you are all aware of. There's nothing I'm going to say that's rocket science. They are just common sense things that you all know about, but being human beings, we have to constantly remind ourselves. So I'll talk about that and then give you some quick update on where we are with regards to COVID vaccines, and then talk very briefly. I believe I have just maybe 1 or 2 slides to talk about flu. And then there'll be time for Q&A after Dr. Bright presents information. So let's kickstart with those, essential habits we all should keep. The first one is, of course, to get your shots. When you talk about fall, you are starting to look at the potential that people could come in contact with the COVID virus or with the flu virus. Both are viruses, and the best protection against both of these are really your shots. And what has been recommended by the CDC is that when it comes to the flu, you should get your shot every year. Why? Because the virus that causes flu changes every year. So the virus that caused it last year is not the same strain that is going to cause it this year. So you can't rely on the protection you got from last year. So every year you should try to get another shot of the flu. Of course, for COVID, the recommendations are a bit different because it's still new to us, and I'll be going over most of those as we go along. So the second thing is be aware of what is happening within your community in terms of the levels of COVID. Depending on where you live, the level of COVID could be different. And the local communities do a good job of sharing with people how COVID is tracking in their different communities. So you want to pay attention to that. If you live in a community that has a high rate of transmission, naturally, that means you should be more cautious, because it means that your chances of exposure are much greater than in a community where the level of transmission is very low. So again, just keep track of what's going on. And there is a very useful site on the CDC website where you can actually go in, put your state, and choose your county, and it will give you all the data you need about how it is tracking within your community. That's the link that you see on my slide here. If I were to click on that link, it will take me to that site. So be conscious of that. Number 3, everybody should be aware of this. Wash your hands, right? Practice hand washing. It's unbelievable how many people, if you go to the airport or restaurants or some other high traffic areas, people dash into the bathroom, they come straight out, no washing of their hands. That is such a bad habit. It's a good habit to wash your hands. It's recommended to do that for 20 seconds. And of course, we should teach our kids to do the same thing. And there are 5 steps to good hand washing that we should tell our kids. That the first is to wet their hands with water, then lather it with soap, then scrub it together, rinse it again with water and dry it. And there are specific times when it's important for people to wash their hands. For example, as I said earlier, if you go to the bathroom or after you eat, because these are times when you have a high likelihood of picking up germs. And by practicing hand washing, it will help to keep you much safer. Number 4, get your health screenings. You know, there are many diseases that either are preventable or when they are caught early can be very life-saving. You know, for example, things like, you know, say colon cancer, if you are at the appropriate age and you go for your screening and they catch it early, then it's much easier to treat, right? Versus when it's not caught early and suddenly it's in stage 4, and then it's much more difficult to handle. Things like diabetes, they can easily pick things up if they, you know, take your hemoglobin A1C just to see how it is trending, or even something as simple as your blood pressure being checked. If it's high, you may not have any symptoms, but it's a silent killer, as they say. So these are all simple things. And if you're a woman, make sure that you're having mammogram when you get to the age where, you know, you need to have mammogram screening, or if you are a man, your prostate check, all these things. So make sure you are doing those things. And of course, you know, having good dental hygiene is always good practice. So do those things. Number 5, brush your teeth. Again, this is something we teach our children to do, right? So we as adults should be modeling that, because if you use, you know, fluoride toothpaste is healthy for the teeth. It helps to maintain the strength of the bone of the teeth, and you know, keeps it healthy. So make sure you are practicing those dental hygiene frequently. Sleep. Many of us don't get the required hours of sleep. What is recommended is a minimum of 7, typically 7 to 8 hours. A lot of us don't get that. It's not very good. You may not see the impact right away. But again, these are things that over a long period of time, if you continue with a bad habit, it then tends to come back and haunt you. So do all you can to get at least 7 hours of sleep. If you are exposed to the sun, often it's important that you use some type of sunscreen. I know those of us with dark skin, we have this erroneous belief that, well, because our skin is dark, you know, we won't have, let's say, skin cancer. The reason for protecting your skin is against things like melanoma, or, you know, other skin cancers, etc. But whether your skin is dark or not, you should practice using a sunscreen or sun protection if you are going to be exposed to the sun for a long period of time. And wear shirts or pants that can also cover up your skin. And then number 8, you know, just all the things we do to keep our mental health. One of them is really interacting with people in our social network, relatives, friends. You know, these things, or even church members, if you go to church or if you go to mosque, your friends, all those people that are within your circle of network, interacting with them can help you relieve stress, because stress can be a trigger for a lot of diseases. And by practicing those things, you know, including even like prayer, say meditation, but if you're a Christian or others and you pray, those things are very healthy. They are helpful. They've actually shown scientifically, you know, when people pray, that it can lower their blood pressure, etc. So make sure you unwind, don't allow stress to build up in your body. Number 9, when you drink fluids, there are people who never drink ordinary water, but water is still your best fluid to drink. It's the healthiest, it's the most natural. All these other drinks, you know, soft drinks or whatever, they are loaded with sugar and with calories, which are not healthy for us. So try to substitute, you know, those sugary drinks or alcoholic beverages with just ordinary water that is much safer. Number 10, moving our bodies. You know, I think God created our bodies not to stay still. Let's not become couch potatoes. Let's find time in our day, no matter how busy we are, to move our bodies. Let the muscles of your body squeeze blood, you know, and it keeps you healthy. And what's recommended is at least 150 minutes of moderate intensity aerobic exercise. You know, is that exercise you do where, you know, you may feel a little bit of panting, but you're not going to run out of breath. Like when you run vigorously, you run out of breath. But if you are walking briskly, you are not going to run out of breath, but it's still very healthy. So that's moderate intensity aerobic exercise. You should do those things. and and then also to do muscle strengthening activities at least 2 days each week. These are healthy habits that we should cultivate. Of course, eating healthy. I'm not going to say much about this because that's in the domain of Dr. Bright. I'm sure she will have a lot of things to say about that, but it cannot be overemphasized, the importance of eating healthy. So I leave it at that. And finally, for those who smoke, I strongly encourage you to think of a way to stop, because I am not aware of a single benefit to the human body for smoking. If anything, smoking causes all kinds of issues. There is nothing healthy about it. There is no real benefit to it. So it's not a habit that's helpful, and you want to do all you can to consider quitting. So these are 12 very quick habits that we can easily practice, easily remember, and do. So with that, let me transition quickly to giving updates on the COVID-19 vaccines. In the US, there are 4 COVID-19 vaccines that are currently approved, that are being used. I will go over each of these 4. Now, the recommendations for which vaccine you take are based on 3 different factors. What is your age? Because not all the vaccines are approved at for all age groups. What was the first vaccine you received? If you got one type of vaccine versus a different type of vaccine. And when was the last time you actually got the COVID-19 vaccine? Those are the 3 factors that should determine which vaccine you take and when. And I'm going to cover this very quickly. But for individuals who are moderately or severely immunocompromised, like people who have had cancer, or people who are taking medications that weaken the immune system, or people that have other immune type diseases, like somebody has HIV, etc. There are different recommendations for those individuals. Vaccines, like anything else, do have side effects. The COVID vaccines have side effects. Most of them are very mild, like you have pain at the site. I mean, if somebody pokes you with a needle, you are going to have pain, right? Some people may have, muscle aches, maybe a little bit of fever, all those, joint pains, etc. These are all mild. They will go away in about 2 days or so. But a few people could have severe side effects, right? Which could be like a severe allergic reaction. That's typically why when you take these vaccines, they ask you to wait around for like 15 minutes, so that if you are one of those people that develop a severe allergic reaction, they can treat you right away. They have, EpiPen around, or other ways to get you healthy. But the vaccines are relatively safe for the most part. So let me talk about, one thing that is known about these vaccines is that they actually work. There is too much information out there to support the fact that these vaccines work to protect people. And what these vaccines really do is they do 3 key things. They prevent somebody from becoming seriously ill. They prevent people from becoming sick enough to go to the hospital and get hospitalized. And they prevent death. So somebody can ask the question, well, if I take the vaccine, can I have COVID? Yeah, you could have COVID. But if these 3 things are prevented, who cares if you have COVID? Having COVID is not the issue. Having COVID and becoming seriously ill or being hospitalized or dying, that is what we want to prevent. And that's what these vaccines do. And there's preponderance of data to support that. So the 4 types of vaccines that have been approved in the US, as I told you, are the ones by Pfizer and BioNTech, Moderna. These are the names of the companies, Novavax, and Johnson & Johnson. So Johnson & Johnson has 3 different sectors. They have pharmaceuticals, which is called Janssen. They have medical devices and consumer healthcare. It's the pharmaceutical part of Johnson & Johnson, Janssen, that produced a vaccine. Ironically, I've worked for 2 of those companies, number 1 and 4, Pfizer and J&J. And I know the head of regulatory affairs and quality at Novavax. She's a Nigerian, used to be my boss when I was at Pfizer. And Moderna, I just recently hired somebody from that company to work under me. So I have something to do with each of these 4 companies. So the CDC, when it comes to the J&J vaccine, it should be considered only in certain situations because of the safety issue associated with it. It's known to cause some blood clots, and I will talk about the J&J vaccine a little later. But these are the 4 companies that have produced drugs, that produce vaccines. Now, in terms of getting boosters, you probably hear a lot about boosters these days. Now, the good news is that a new set of those vaccines have been developed that are called bivalent. If you're familiar with all these suffixes, bi means 2 or double. And they are called bivalent because they are effective against the original virus that caused COVID-19 and the most common variant now called the Omicron variant. There are 2 of them, BA4 and BA5. You've heard a lot about Omicron. So the original vaccines were called monovalent because they were, mono means 1 or single, because those were developed against the original virus that caused COVID. But the virus, as we said, most of these viruses change over time, they mutate. And then you end up with new variants. When they change, they become a new variant. So the most common variant now is Omicron. So those original vaccines are not as effective. They are effective to some extent against Omicron, but not as effective. So the good news is some of these companies, like Pfizer and Moderna specifically, they've developed these bivalent vaccines, which are recommended to be used as boosters. So I will, so essentially, when you say that someone is up to date with their COVID-19 vaccine, what does that actually mean? It means they've completed the primary series, and I'll talk about that shortly. And then they have also received the most recent booster that is recommended by the CDC for their age group. So again, as I said earlier, the type of vaccine you get depends on your age, the type of vaccine you got originally, and the time that you received that last vaccine. And of course, people that are moderately or severely immunocompromised, there's a different recommendation for them. So if you have been vaccinated and you end up becoming ill with COVID-19, you are still considered to be up to date with your vaccination. It doesn't mean that you should go and get revaccinated or get an additional booster. There is what you call breakthrough infections, where people that have been fully vaccinated, you've seen, for example, President Biden is very fully vaccinated, but he had that breakthrough infection. Even Anthony Fauci, who was the head of the infectious diseases group at NIH and was supporting Biden prior to that, President Trump, he too had this breakthrough. So there are people that have them, but it doesn't mean that they are not considered up to date. It's just that sometimes people could have a breakthrough. But when people have this breakthrough, that, like I said, because they are vaccinated, they won't need to be hospitalized. The disease will not be severe, and they are not going to die, which are real tangible benefits. So if you recently had COVID-19, it is recommended that you should try to delay your next vaccine by 3 months, right? From the time that you started experiencing symptoms. And if you didn't have any symptoms, and you just tested positive, it's the same thing. Wait about 3 months before you actually get vaccinated. Again, as I said, reinfection is likely to occur in the weeks and months after infection. Very unlikely in the few weeks. So it's okay to wait for 3 months before you get vaccinated. But of course, there are people in a certain risk category, like the people we talked about earlier, having immunocompromised situation and so on, for whom there may be a different set of recommendations. So let me talk about each of these vaccines and the age groups in which they can be used. Let's begin with the Pfizer vaccine, and starting with children ages 6. The ages that the vaccine has been recommended for are from ages 6 and above. So if we look at that age group comprising of children and teens from ages 6 months to 17 years for the Pfizer vaccine, again, it's purely based on the age on the day that the child or the teen received the vaccination. It's not based on how big they are, their weight, or their size or anything else. But in general, children get smaller doses compared to teens and compared to adults based on the age group they belong in. So if we look at that group from 6 months to 17 years, it's further broken down into smaller age ranges. So from age 6 months to 4 years, they can get their first dose of that Pfizer vaccine. About 3 to 8 weeks later, they can get their second dose after they got the first dose. And then their third dose should also be the Pfizer vaccine. So what is important to remember here is that for children ages 4 and below, that is 6 months to 4 years, they should only stick with the Pfizer vaccine. Don't change to Moderna or J&J or Novavax or some other vaccine. So you get the third dose about 2 months after the second dose. That's the important thing for that age group. Then from age 5 to 11, that is basically, the first dose, the second dose is the same thing, 3 to 8 weeks after the first dose. But what is different starting from this age group, age 5 to 11, is that now you can get this booster that we talked about earlier, the bivalent, which protects against both the original virus that caused COVID and the current Omicron variant that is spreading around. Again, it's typically 2 months after the second dose. And then for ages 12 to 17, essentially same type of scenario. The only difference is that between age 12 and 17, you can get either the Pfizer or the Moderna as your bivalent booster. Those are the two companies that have this bivalent booster. So up to age 11, you won't get the Moderna, but from age 12 to 17, you can get the Moderna booster within that teenage group. And then if we go to Moderna, same thing between age 16 to 17, very similar to the Pfizer, except the second dose, you wait for 4 to 8 weeks instead of 3 to 8 weeks for the Pfizer. And then the third dose, you don't get a Moderna vaccine for the booster, as I mentioned earlier. You get the Pfizer. So even though you got Moderna for the first and second doses in the primary series, now you only have to get Pfizer for the third dose. That is for children up to age 5. But as from age 6, you can see that the real difference is this third column. You can now get either the Pfizer or the Moderna. So before age 6, only the Pfizer. After age 6, you can get either the Moderna or the Pfizer for that age group. And then when we look at the Novavax is it's actually the most recent that was approved by the FDA. So as you can see, I'm only covering age 12 to 17 and then the adult group later. They have not been approved below age 12. So anything below age 12, you are likely going to get either the Pfizer or the Moderna. But for Novavax, for somebody age 12 to 17, just like the Moderna, just like the Pfizer, you wait 3 to 8 weeks to get your second dose. And then 2 months later, you can get either the Pfizer or the Moderna booster. And then if we now look at the adults, so J&J, it's not approved. I'll talk about J&J shortly, but if we go back to the Pfizer in adults are considered from age 18 and older, the series are very similar, but for adults, one thing that's different is that if you got the Pfizer as your first and second dose, you can get your third dose at the booster with either Pfizer or Moderna 2 weeks later, right? And then for Moderna, in adults age 18 and older, same thing. They can, of course, you wait 4 to 8 weeks instead of 3 to 8 weeks for Pfizer. But again, 2 months later, your third dose can be either Pfizer or Moderna. And then for Novavax, as I said earlier, has not been approved in a younger age group, only from I think age 12 to and above. So for adults, just like the Pfizer, wait 3 to 8 weeks after the first dose, and then 2 months later, you get Pfizer or Moderna as your booster. And then when it comes to the Johnson & Johnson part of it, they are only approved for adults. That's why we didn't talk about Johnson & Johnson for younger people. it's only from adults. So 18 and older, that's when you get a single shot. You get your shot. If you got a single shot of Pfizer as an adult, now you are eligible to get either the Moderna or the Pfizer bivalent for your second dose. And yeah, so I'm going to skip a few things and just go directly to, I wanted to talk briefly about just your flu vaccine. So with the flu, so for flu, just look at these statistics. Many people don't think of flu as a problem, but in the US, between 2019 and 2020, when they, they collected some data on the impact of the flu within that season, it actually caused about 38 million people to be sick. That is just the regular flu, influenza. And about almost 500,000 of them ended up in the hospital. And about 22,000 actually died of the flu. So believe it or not, the flu, even though it's been with us for generations, still kills people today. And that's why you shouldn't take it lightly. And at the bottom part, you see that 7.5 million people had flu illnesses, and in just Kentucky and Kansas alone, there were 105,000 hospitalizations and about 6,300 deaths. So as I said, this is still killing people. So what can you do about the flu? There are 3 things you can take to protect against the flu, according to the CDC. So every 6 months and older should get their flu vaccine every year, right? During every season. So get the vaccine. That's a simple way to prevent the flu. Secondly, you should take actions every day to stop the spread, because this virus is spread, through the air, right? So if you are coughing, for example, make sure you cover your mouth and your nose with a tissue and throw that tissue in the trash after that. Make sure you practice hand washing frequently, right? As you touch surfaces or come in contact with people, wear your mask if at all possible, especially when you are in a crowd. If you do these simple things, it can go a long way to helping you. And if you know somebody who actually, if you have the flu, then you want to stay home. Don't go to work and spread the virus to other people, or don't go to a crowded place and spread the virus. So these are things we can all do to help one another. But at the end of the day, if somebody ends up with the flu, there are prescription medications, antivirals that can be given to help that individual. So with that, let me stop and turn it over to Dr. Bright to give our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ekuta. Over to you, Dr. Bright.
Can you, okay, let's see. Trying to, okay, there it is. My computer is a little bit slow. Okay. All right, can you see that?
Yeah.
All right, thank you so much. First of all, for having me, Ms. Ify and Dr. Adrian. Thank you, Dr. Ekuta, nice to meet you. Thank you for those reminders, very important reminders about COVID-19, as well as some of the health reminders that you gave us. In the interest of the time, I know that we have a very short time here. I'm going to try to be concise, yet to go fairly quickly in terms of what I wanted to discuss this evening. But I wanted to approach this evening in terms of cancer prevention and cancer awareness, because I do work for the Office of Minority Health and Health Disparities, within the Lombardi Cancer Center. So this evening, I wanted to, first of all, start to increase the awareness about foodborne illnesses, as well as providing some prevention strategies, and also to, even in the same line as Dr. Ekuta mentioned, in terms of staying safe during the holidays, even in addition to COVID. So let's look at, first of all, what is a foodborne illness? Often we use the term interchangeably, and it's also referring to food poisoning. So it's anything that is when any food or water or beverages are contaminated, either by bacteria or toxins or parasites, and the person gets sick, we consider that they suffer from food poisoning. It's something that any of us can get. In terms of some of the statistics, there's more than 250 foodborne illnesses, meaning that people getting sick because of something that they ate. When we look at the US in terms of statistics from the CDC, which is the Center for Disease Control, and looking at data for 2021, 48 million Americans suffered from foodborne illnesses or got sick, got food poisoning. Last year, that's about 1 in 6 Americans. And if we're looking at worldwide data, that would be about 1 in 10 people worldwide getting sick from food poisoning. 128,000 people also got hospitalized last year. And actually, people do die of food poisoning. And last year in 2021, 3,000 people died of food poisoning. So there are a couple of common food-borne pathogens. I'm not going to bore you with with all of them, but there's some common one I'm sure that you've heard, because we've had outbreaks in the past. Things like salmonella is a very common one, or E. coli, listerias. Those are some of the common pathogens that we often find, and that also causing a lot of outbreaks luckily not a lot, but are causing, major outbreaks within the US. So this is a much smaller slide, but basically this is a slide that, help you to identify some of those foodborne pathogens. And I'm not going to go in details talking about them, but I'm going to say simple things that most of us already know and that are common sense, right? Making sure that, you cook your food properly, right? That you respect certain temperatures, and we're going to look at that in a few minutes. Making sure that you wash your fruits and your vegetables before you eat them. Right, making sure that if you buy a canned product and you see that it has a different shape, that not to use those. One thing that I want to particularly mention in terms of the different bacteria is listeria. Listeria is a bacteria that is often found in raw milk or dairy products, even some of your deli meats and hot dogs, things that are not properly refrigerated. And this one is a major concern, because it increases the risk of food poisoning is increased for people that are pregnant, for example, pregnant women, people that are over the age of 65, and people whose immune system is already weakened. So people that have diabetes, HIV/AIDS, people that going through chemotherapy or radiation, or have had cancer, those, this group of people need to be much more careful. But again, and this is one reason why we even talking about it, even with a perspective of cancer, because with anybody that has had an immune system that has been weakened, they tend, to get, they can get food poisoning more easily, or it could be more severe than for somebody who doesn't have the immune system that is weaker. So some of the symptoms are common in, nausea, vomiting, stomach cramping, diarrhea. Those are the common symptoms when somebody gets food poisoning. Depending on the severity, the symptoms can be worse. But as we saw before in terms of the data, that there's still a life threatening situation. So we don't want to take it lightly at the same time. And we're also talking about it in terms of the holidays coming up, because, you know, many of us are going to be exposed to different foods, you know, outside, you know, going, you know, people inviting us. So it's much more, the probability of us, you know, getting a food poisoning increases because of the increased activities around food that we having or that we are involved in around the holidays. Now, if you have any of those symptoms and they are severe, we recommend that you do consult with a healthcare provider. So you have a fever or a diarrhea that, you know, that is very, you know, that doesn't go away after 3 days, you have blood in your diarrhea, you want to consult with your healthcare provider. And some of the major concern is dehydration, for example, that, you know, if you have diarrhea, you have vomiting, that will also increase your risk of being dehydrated and causing even more problems. So again, I mentioned that before with the Listeria bacteria, but overall, when we're talking about food poisoning, again, adults age 65 and older are at higher risk of getting food poisoning. Children under the age of 5 years old, people, again, that have a weaker immune system, and pregnant women. It doesn't mean that the rest of us don't, you know, don't have any risk of food poisoning. It just means that it's higher in this group of people. So there are some prevention steps that, you know, that we need to follow. And for, again, I come back to that, and it seems that it's common sense, but sometimes we forget or we don't do it because we're in a rush. And even earlier, Dr. Ekuta mentioned even the washing of our hands, right? That seems so basic, but that we tend to do it too quickly. So making sure that, you know, if we are going to cook, that the surface area of the kitchen is clean, that our hands are clean, that we make sure that we disinfect the area where we are going to be cooking or preparing food, and even serving food, making sure that we separate raw food versus cooked food or versus fruits and vegetables. You know, those are things that we already know, but often, you know, during the holidays, because we are in a rush and we have so many things to do, that we tend to be less attentive to, and that's when sometimes problems occurs. So this is really a reminder for all of us to stay healthy. So to make sure that, you know, you follow those simple instructions, making sure that, you know, you want to usually start with your fresh. If you are going to make a stew, for example, that you start with your fruits and your vegetable, cutting your vegetable first, putting them aside before you go on and cut the meat. And, you know, making sure that even you're pulling out, you know, ingredients as you need them, instead of, let's say, taking out the fish or taking out the meat and leaving it out for a couple of hours, you know, before you cook it. And then also one thing that is also very important in those 4 steps is the temperature. And unfortunately, many people don't know the right temperatures. But, you know, if you Google, you know, and you go to the Food and Drug Administration of the USDA, and Google, you know, food safety or, you know, proper food temperature, you will get, you know, a document that helps you identify, you know, the proper temperature. And this one thing that all of us should have in our kitchen that unfortunately many people do not have is a thermometer, right? A food thermometer. And often we cook food, you know, and we prepare food the way that we were taught. And so we look at it, we taste it, but, you know, we are not always checking the temperature. And then last but not least, making sure that once, you know, the food has been cooked, that is properly refrigerated or properly stored. So this is a cooking temperature sheet that is available, and is available at the CDC. And that is, you know, fairly easy to know. You could even print it and put that on your refrigerator and keep that as a reminder for the proper temperature. Again, you know, the emphasis in anybody who has, you know, who is at higher risk, you know, would be very important for someone to have that, you know. And again, you know, the information is on this slide, or you can take a picture and then go to the website and, have that and keep that, for example, on your fridge. That would be something nice to have. Again, I'm not going to bore you with this very busy slide, but just a couple of things that I want to mention here. When we're talking about chilling temperature, we're referring to, the temperature of our refrigerator that should be 40 degrees or below, and the freezer that should be below 0, right? And sometimes when, if your refrigerator is too full, right, the temperature inside goes down, and that can impact and affect the quality of the food that is in your refrigerator. Another thing is making sure that, when you go and do your grocery stores, that you don't, once you get home, to make sure that you put things away very quickly. There's three right way of defrosting foods, right? It's either in the refrigerator, in cold water, or in the microwave. But then there's all other ways that, unfortunately, that we tend to defrost things sometimes with people keeping it food outside for a couple of hours, or sometimes even the whole day or the whole night. Those are things that create and kind of prepare the environment for microbe and for bacteria to grow. Also in our communities, right, we like to marinate our chicken or fish, from the day before, but any type of marinating should be, done in the refrigerator as well. And also when we tend to cook things in batch, right? Some of us have large family. We have to remember that as we cooling the food, it needs to be in a to divide the amount of food. So you don't want to keep it in a big container, but you want to put it in a different smaller containers. So in terms of food and cancer, there's a couple of concerns. That unfortunately some of the food that we get, right, is either have different, we were talking about some of the pathogens that cause foodborne illnesses or poisoning. And when we're talking about food and cancer and some of the relationship, we're thinking at things like pesticides, antibiotics, hormones, things like nitrates or nitrites, things that you find in some of your cured meat, for example, in the hot dogs, in the ham. Those have nitrates and nitrites. And that's why one of the recommendations in terms of food and cancer is to avoid any type of processed food, right? To try to eat your food, to get food that is of good quality. And I know that often there are challenges in terms of finances, but as best as possible to make sure that you stay away from all those processed food. Even Dr. Ekuta also talked about alcohol, smoking. Those are things that you want to stay away that would have there's a strong correlation between food and cancer. And even in terms of alcohol, and specifically breast cancer, more and more research are showing that the women that consume more alcohol tend to get more breast cancer. So there's a strong correlation between those two. So we also have to be mindful and to try to keep those good habits. So I'm not going to go too much into the in terms of what to do, but because I want to stay in terms of the staying safe for the holidays. So I'm going to make some of you smile. Some of you may recognize a good old okra soup, or depending on how you will decide to celebrate the holidays. It'll be with turkey or some good jollof rice, or like I said, some okra soup. The idea is that we want to stay safe, right? And so one way, again, that we want to stay safe, and again, apply some of the prevention strategies that I've talked about before to make sure that that's happened. Now, just want to, talk, just a couple of slides here in terms of COVID, and ask the question, can the COVID virus live on food? And actually, there's no evidence, right? The research doesn't show that, the COVID virus, causes, issue in them. There's no evidence. However, because, when we are talking about food, we tend to be in close proximity of other people, right? And as we're thinking about the holidays, that's when we have to make sure and remember those COVID regulation and, strategies that we need to follow to stay healthy and protected, even as Dr. Ekuta mentioned before. So even as you go into different events, to make sure as much as possible that you keep your mask, or if you are the person, receiving and having guests over, thinking about, the way that you want to set up the table, making sure if people are going to be seated at the table, that maybe that you allow for a little bit more space than, than the previous years, making sure that, you have disinfectant wipes available for people, things like, having paper towel instead of having cloth, towels in the bathroom so that, people can wash their hands, dry them and throw it out. Thinking, taking a little bit more time to make sure that, as we are entertaining guests or as we go into places and eating at different places, that we are staying safe, right? Not only in terms of food poisoning, but also in terms of COVID, as was mentioned before, right? And so paying attention to small details, making sure that if people are going to use the same utensil, you may want to gently suggest that people use gloves. And I know that sometimes it can be hard to tell people what to do, especially adults. But, if we model the behavior, right, that will also encourage people to do the same, and to remind people gently that, we want to stay safe and we want to continue to help each other stay safe. If you are in a closed environment and you're having guests, making sure that, you keep the area, open, that once in a while you go and open the windows to make sure that there's air that is coming in to make sure that everybody is safe. Just here again, a couple of things, as we are preparing and I'm going to finish here with the safe handling of leftovers, as we are going to have a lot of help leftovers, sometimes turkey or other things, right? There's also the right way and the wrong way of doing it. So first of all, we want to make sure that when we have food outside, we don't keep it for too long. Or let's say you are serving food for a large group of people, the recommendation that is that you bring out the food by batches, right? Instead of putting everything on the table and letting people eat, then you want to maybe have, divide the food with batches, and you take it out as you go, right? So that way the food doesn't stay outside too long. And once the party or, your event is over, to make sure that you quickly put that food away and wrap it properly or put it in containers properly, right? And even another thing that I want to mention here on this slide is the refreezing. Sometimes, we know that when you thaw something, you do not want to refreeze it right afterwards. There's an exception here. So if you ever have to, let's say you have some leftover and you freeze it, if you want to, you take it out, but you still haven't finished it, the best way to do that is for you to, warm it again, very hot, and let it, cool, and then you will be able to refreeze it. By the encouragement and the advice is that as much as, to avoid even refreezing something that has already been defrosted, even if it's cooked already, and even more so if it's not cooked. So being very careful in terms of, just maybe defrosting what you are going to eat to avoid having to refreeze anything. So I'm sorry here. So I know that I've gone very fast, and we're going to take questions. But if there's any type of issue, you yourself experiencing something very unusual in terms of food poisoning, there are instances, and places where you can report it. And or if you go and eat someplace and then after that, let's say you go out to a restaurant and after that your whole family has diarrhea, we also have a responsibility to report that. Right, and that will be with the FDA and with that number that is on the slide. So again, I apologize if I was a little bit, flying through the slide, but I was trying to be mindful in terms of the time that we have today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bright. Thank you so much for this amazing session. I think that just listening to you, I think we're ready for Thanksgiving. I think we're ready for Thanksgiving, just ensuring that, we eat healthy and we do the right things just to ensure that our food is safe. We want to thank you for this session. We would like to actually Miss Ify, I think we would like to have we'd like to have Dr. Bright again, so she could just, just do this session again, because we deal with food every day of our lives. So I think it's something that we need to do again. So thank you very much, Dr. Bright. This is time for questions. I noticed that Dr. Ekuta has jumped off.
Right.
He had to quickly go do something. So we can ask questions now.
Yeah, Dr. Ekuta said if anybody have a question for him, they can put it in the chat. We'll send it over to him and he can respond and we'll send it back to you. So apologies, but he had other things to attend to.
Great.
Right.
Yeah,
and for Dr. Mireille, we're gonna be having her more often because she's from Côte d'Ivoire. We're happy to have a registered dietitian who is our sister, our wife, our auntie. So, maybe in future times she will start delving into our food. So it's good to know what to do to preserve food and do this, but she can also break down some of our more common food that, we all are used to and we eat all the time. So once again, on behalf of all the listeners, we thank you and we're sure to have you back. So if anybody has questions, this is the time to ask your questions.
I think there was a hand raised, but I'm not
yeah,
seeing.
I think I saw that. I think it was Salami Ololade. Do you still want to ask your question, Ololade Salami? So anyone else can ask questions too. We all cook, we all eat food.
Yeah, so I'm not sure what the question is about salami, but salami is part of those foods that are, cured, what we consider cured meat. So they will have those nitrates that have been shown to be carcinogenic. So definitely like your ham that you buy, your hot dogs, unless it says on the package no nitrates, then if it doesn't say no nitrates, most likely they will have nitrates in there.
Okay, yeah, so Ololade Salami, you can go ahead and ask your question. I can see that your hand is raised.
I think Dr. Adrian has
Dr. Adrian, yeah, you can go ahead and ask your question.
In fact, Mireille Salami, just whom they mentioned, is a person, not Salami the food we eat.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you very much.
My mistake.
My mistake. Thank you very much. And first, I want just to ask a sister if we can have those slides really available. Just if our speakers can make those slides available, that will help us a lot. Knowledge is power, as they always say. And I'm very happy here to see that some of the French-speaking pastors of the region are here. And these are people who have big congregations. I see Pastor Coley, Pastor Kamase, who has one of the largest Togolese church in this area. And again, I see Brother Nzonzo is here, who has a big follow-up. Just people follow him on the internet, what he does. But here are my questions. Here, just at my church here in this building, some years ago, I used to run some promotion seminars here, speaking about just stressing on what we call risk factors when it comes to cancer. Just and as a pastor, not only that I'm a public health scholar, but I'm a pastor as well. And just every Sunday, I want to make sure that the people, my church members, understand the basic of the Christian message. But again, as a health promoter, it is my pastoral duty or mandate to make sure that they understand why they have to engage in health promotion. One of my health promotion statements is that the well-being of every institution, including the church, depends on the well-being of individuals. If individuals are not healthier, we cannot do mission, we cannot have our churches, and so on. But understanding what you said, where I am here in Silver Spring, we are not far from Red Apple. Almost every Sunday, my church members, after the service, they run quickly there to go to buy food that comes from Africa. I don't know how much that food is healthier, but I think it is very important for people to have just that food literacy. Very important, because when you talk about risk factors, mainly when related to cancer, we know that our lifestyle, not only in terms of what we eat or just what we do, but food has much to do with it. I don't know how much people know about the food that is being imported from Africa to here, and how healthy it is. I don't know, but there is a need really for somebody like you just to be very present in our communities. And I'm speaking about the French-speaking communities, which I know very well. I've been in this region for more than 20 years now. And you speak French, it is very important. How we cook and how even we keep our food. I visit many places where I see people just keeping food in such a way that, and I always tell my church members that if I come to your house, I see what I don't like, I won't eat. And I want to finish by saying that there is that urgency really to bring that knowledge to our people, because we are not home. Just where the police on fire. And in fact, in my church every Sunday, there are people who have, I don't know, just that's where I want to end, that it is very important for people like you to educate us just on food, mainly when it comes to breast cancer. I mean, to cancer generally, not only cancer, but many diseases. And I don't know how much present you are just willing to be in our communities to educate our people. That's what I want to do.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Dr. Adrian, for saying that. And we are, especially in our discussion, even with Miss Ify, right? We've discussed that, the role that Georgetown wants to play in terms even of partnering with, community organization. And, we know that the African immigrant population is a target population in terms of research that we want to do and in terms of working with the communities. But I wanted to say that, the research has shown that when people migrate from their country of origin and come to the US, it doesn't take very long before we tend to adopt, right, the eating habits of the host country. And that's where most of the problems begin to arise, because I've said it before, when you look at African food, overall, our food is fairly, healthy. we of course there's different differences in terms of where you are, but even when you look at just the different types of leaves that we eat, right, and that we cook with, the different stews with the leaves, even the some of the way that we cook is healthy. But I agree with you that there's a lot of there needs to be some teaching and education in terms of, yes, as you saw in the picture, you want to eat the okra soup, but you may not, you don't have to cook it the same way that maybe your mother or your grandmother did. Let's say she was frying, the chicken before. You could, put it in the oven before you actually put it in the rest of the tomatoes and all. So there's ways that we can still enjoy our food and be healthy, right? And that's where, the education comes in. And even we know that food by itself, sometimes the chicken that you buy or the smoked turkey, because that's something that is very predominant. You were talking about red apples. I've been to Red Apple myself in the past in Silver Spring. So some of those things also have the nitrites that we were talking about. So we have to, so if let's say you have a choice between buying the smoked chicken versus the smoked turkey, you'll be better off buying the smoked turkey. I mean, the smoked chicken, that may not have nitrites compared to the smoked turkey. But smoked turkey is something that in the African community that is really much, used. So definitely there's a lot of work to be done, a lot of education to be done. And we are definitely want to be involved and partner with the churches and work with the churches to see how we can make sure that, our members and our communities healthier, and not only churches, but, overall communities of faith, right? Faith-based groups, because, I believe that it's a God mandate to be healthy, right? We've been given one body, and, unless, if your body is not healthy, you will not be able to accomplish your God-given purposes. So you absolutely, we need to have a mindset shift to know that, I have to take care of this temple that was given to me, and it's my responsibility. The same way that we take care of other things, the word is clear, our body is a temple of the Holy Spirit. So we have to make sure that we take care of that, temple. And that is by eating right, by exercising, by staying away from smoking, by staying away from, alcohol and things like that. So definitely, we can definitely work together on this, absolutely. And, and as Miss Ify was saying even earlier, also, teaching techniques in terms of how can I still enjoy my jollof rice, but, without clogging my arteries, right? So there's many ways that we can do that and be healthy, absolutely.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bright, for that. Thank you, Dr. Adrian, for that contribution. Do we have one more contribution or question before we hand over the microphone to Ms. Ify to talk about the Howard University research? Any other question? All right, so Ms. Ify, over to you.
Actually, if you allow me, I just wanted to say one thing, and maybe that's something that we can discuss more in details, but there is currently at Georgetown University, there is what we call a pastoral initiative where we are actually encouraging churches. There is an online certificate that is available, and that we are encouraging churches to participate in and take in. And actually Georgetown is providing scholarship to churches to designate, a member of the churches to actually participate in the online certificate so that they can take that information back to their churches and be able to develop a health ministries within their churches. And that initiative is available to churches and community of faith, not only churches, but faith-based communities in Washington, D.C., PG County, and Montgomery County, as well as Virginia. So if any of the pastors on the line tonight or are interested, or want to know more, Miss Ify, I can send you the information, and Dr. Adrian, I can certainly send you the information, and then you can pass it on.
Okay. Thank you for the information. Definitely, if you send us whatever information you have, we'll pass it on. I'm sure most of the pastors online will be interested, and Adrian can help disseminate the information too. Okay. Also, having said that, Howard University Hospital, in collaboration with NIH, also have a survey that they are running right now. It has to do with COVID. The first speaker we listened to talked and reminded us about the do's and don'ts as it relates to safety when it comes to COVID. So we're going to put the link online for our listeners today. If you go on that link, you submit it, then there are survey questions that will be sent to you, and you can answer them. If you successfully respond to all the survey questions, you will be eligible for $100. The survey questions is in 2 sections. So if you complete the first section, you get $50. You complete the second section, actually in 3 sections. So as you complete it, you get increments of $25, but a total of $100. So you do not want to miss that. It doesn't cost anything. You just respond that you were a participant at this particular webinar, and then it will take you over to where you can answer the survey questions. So if you go to the chat, I believe we posted the link.
Yes, the link is in the chat section.
Yeah, the link is in the chat. So if you go there, you will be able to, yeah, okay, it's been posted to everyone. You can copy it and then take the survey. So any additional announcement, questions?
Not from me.
Maybe Sister Ify would want to say that just we would want really to meet with these community leaders who are here, those French-speaking pastors and others. Just so we would want to meet with you on behalf of African Women Cancer Awareness Association, so that you can really take advantage of what we have. Please reach out to us, and Sister Ify and I have some good resources for you. And not only the French-speaking leaders who are here, community leaders who are here, but please reach out to us. We've got great information for you, please.
Yeah, if they're online and would like to say a word, we'll be happy to hear from them, even if it's not a question.
Pasteur Kamase, Samy, mon frère Malik, allez-y. Pasteur Yao, can you speak?
I think 2 participants raised their hands.
Yeah, no, it's you and Dr. Adrian.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
I took mine off.
All right, I
Okay.
think in the absence of any other questions, we want to thank everyone for being a part of this webinar today. We want to thank especially Dr. Bright and
Yeah,
Dr.
yeah.
Jethro Ekuta for being a very insightful resource persons, for us today. So we really appreciate all of the effort you've put in to prepare the slide and to also deliver them the way you have. So thank you very much. And thanks to the AWCA team for always doing this. We've been doing this since the pandemic started. So I will keep supporting our community, even the breast cancer community as well. We've been doing this for 18 years now. So we are still here for you to always provide the resources that you need and the support that you need. So thank you, everyone, and have a good evening.
And take the survey.
Yes, please take the survey.